10. Stars from the Golden Age who secretly hid their disabilities and impairments. These stories are not just history, but also lessons about human strength, about resilience in the face of adversity. Let me join you in pulling back the curtain of secrets, and you will see that behind the perfection are deep pains, silent sacrifices. And personally, after deeply researching these figures, I feel a melancholic sadness mixed with admiration, because they turned pain into art, but the price paid was too high. In the Golden Age, from the 1930s to the 1960s, Hollywood was a dream-producing machine, but also a harsh system. Studios like MGM, Columbia, and Universal controlled every aspect of the stars' lives, from image to personal relationships. Any disability was seen as box office poison, leading to concealment and exploitation. From a historical perspective, this was the era when sound and color technology developed, but society still stigmatized people with disabilities, without protective laws like today. Personally, I see that these stars were not just victims, but also pioneers, paving the way for later acceptance of diversity. Now, let's start with number 1, Clark Gable, the painful secret of the king. Clark Gable, the man dubbed the King of Hollywood, with a charming smile that made so many women swoon. But behind that smile was a painful secret that, if the audience knew, might have shattered his masculine image. At age 32, Gable suffered from severe gum disease, leading to having all his teeth pulled and wearing dentures. The poor quality false teeth caused constant mouth ulcers, infections, and persistent pain. Imagine, ladies and gentlemen, a top star having to take painkillers daily just to film. He was a heavy smoker, and in an era when oral hygiene wasn't emphasized, this wasn't rare, but MGM's studio completely covered it up, because they knew that the image of a perfect man was the key to revenue. I recall the romantic scenes in Gone with the Wind, where Gable kissed Vivien Leigh. She once wrote in her diary that kissing him was like touching lips to a hot stove, because the heat from the infection spread out, and Joan Crawford had to use peppermint oil to mask his bad breath before each scene. From my perspective, this was not just physical pain, but also spiritual humiliation. Gable, the strong man on screen, had to cover his mouth when smiling in real life, avoiding eating in restaurants for fear of his dentures shifting. The studios exploited this, creating substitute close-up shooting techniques with stunt doubles to reduce the time he wore dentures. Analyzing deeper, this shows how Hollywood turned disabilities into tools of control. They knew Gable feared exposure, so they forced him to work non-stop. In the historical context, the Great Depression era made stars completely dependent on studios, and Gable was no exception. He was once the highest paid in Hollywood, but his health gradually declined. Personally, I feel pity for Gable. He was the symbol of American masculinity, but behind it was a lonely man, soaking his dentures in a glass of water every night, fearing discovery. His fifth wife, Kay Williams, later revealed that he lived in constant fear. This makes me think, is perfection worth that pain? And in the social context of that time, when there were no laws protecting people with disabilities, Gable had to endure heroically. His story opens for us a major theme, the cruel exploitation of the studios. Let's pause a moment to reflect before moving to the next star, because from here, we will see the repetition of tragedy. But each person had their own way of adapting. This transition will lead us from Gable's physical pain to James Dean's sensory struggles, keeping the story smooth and emotions rising. Next, number 2, James Dean, the rebel with a hidden battle. James Dean, the young guy with a cool, tough look, symbol of rebellion and rebel without a cause. But behind the squinting eyes and distinctive acting style were sensory defects that he had to hide. Dean had severe nearsightedness from childhood, barely able to see beyond a few feet without thick glasses, which the studio forbade him to wear on screen. He was extremely nearsighted, and thick glasses were inseparable offset. Moreover, Dean had partial hearing loss, making him react slowly, which people mistook for an artistic choice. Analyzing his style, I see that the coolness was actually compensation for isolation. He confided to friend Dennis Hopper, "People think I'm difficult, but I'm just trying to understand what's happening. I'm always one beat behind." From a personal perspective, Dean makes me think of young people today struggling with invisible disabilities. He died at 24 in a car accident, and the studio exploited his lonely image for profit, without any support. In Rebel Without a Cause, director Nicholas Ray had to use staff to position him before each take, because he couldn't see the marks on the floor. This added danger to the scenes, and his impulsive acting style was actually a way to adapt to the defects. History shows that Dean only had 3 major films, but they shaped the 1950s youth generation, with themes of alienation, which he himself experienced due to disabilities. Personally, Dean's story has high tragedy because he represented rebellion against the system, but that system exploited his very pain. Imagine a young, talented guy, but always feeling disconnected because he couldn't hear or see clearly. This moves me because it smoothly shifts from the cool image to profound loneliness. In the Hollywood context of the 1950s, when color films and widescreen developed, but disability stigma persisted, Dean is a typical example of creative adaptation. He once said that his roles were involved now, reflecting his personal struggle. From my analysis, if Dean had lived longer, he might have changed how Hollywood viewed disabilities. His story adds mystery. Were those legendary roles products of talent or forced adaptation? And the emotion here is regret. A youthful talent cut short too soon, leading us to other stars who lived longer but suffered no less. Now, let's move to Rita Hayworth, where we will see physical transformations not just about disabilities but also identity, keeping the emotional flow from regret to pity. Now, number 3, Rita Hayworth, the shocking transformation. Rita Hayworth, America's love goddess, but she wasn't born that way. Real name Margarita Cancino. She was created by Columbia Studio through painful procedures to erase her Spanish features. Harry Cohn, the studio boss, declared she couldn't sell with low hairline and ethnic traits. So, for over a year, she endured electrolysis without anesthesia, burning each hair follicle to raise the hairline more than an inch. Blood often seeped through her clothes, and she only slept when the scars healed. The process lasted 16 months under Max Factor's supervision. Additionally, her legs were uneven in length, so high heels always had hidden orthotics, causing terrible hip pain in dance scenes. Analyzing. I see this as a typical example of racism in Hollywood. They forced her to deny her roots, making her ashamed of herself. She once told her daughter, "They made me ashamed of who I really am." Personally, her famous line, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me," moves me deeply. It reflects the loneliness of a woman turned into a fantasy. In history, Hayworth was also forced to lose weight and dye her hair red to become the American dream girl, and the electrolysis process completely changed her face, making it more balanced according to white standards. From a social perspective, this was the era when Latin women were marginalized, and Hayworth was a typical victim. She was once called too ethnic, and the studio erased her heritage to fit American audiences. Personally, I see the tragedy here as loss of identity. She suffered not just physical but spiritual pain, leading to later health issues like Alzheimer's. Let's reflect, ladies and gentlemen, on how Hollywood turned people into products, and Hayworth is the symbol of that. The seamless emotion here is from admiration of her beauty to the pain of self-denial, creating a dramatic and mysterious story, leading us to the voluntary transformations of the next star, Lon Chaney Sr., where sacrifice for art becomes the main theme, keeping the emotional flow from pity to astonishment. Number 4, Lon Chaney Sr., the self-torturer. Lon Chaney, the man of 1,000 faces, born to deaf parents. He learned facial expressions from sign language. But his transformations went beyond skill. They were voluntary torture. In The Hunchback of Notre Dame, he wore concrete and metal devices weighing 70 pounds, crushing his organs, enduring only 10 minutes at a time. Director Wallace Worsley recounted him vomiting blood between scenes. In The Phantom of the Opera, he used wires to pull his nose, hooks to stretch his cheeks, chemical paint burning his eye skin, leading to temporary blindness. And in London After Midnight, sharp wires around his gums caused infection, leading to blood poisoning. Analyzing, Chaney turned pain into art, but the price was death at 47 from immune system damage. His last words, "I created monsters. Now they create me." From a personal perspective, Chaney astonishes me about sacrifice for art. He refused lighter materials because Quasimodo must hurt, so must I. In silent film history, Chaney was a makeup master, using wax, cotton, and collodion for effects, but they caused permanent skin and eye damage. He once lost partial vision from toxic putty and paint. Personally, I see that Chaney represents masochism in art, where to achieve authenticity, he self-destructed. The studio hid the consequences, promoting him as a genius, but provided no medical support. This adds seriousness and emotion, a man self-destructing to prove worth, while the studio exploits. His story is a warning about the limits of dedication, and it smoothly transitions to the double secrets of the next female star, Merle Oberon, where disability meets racial stigma, keeping the emotion from astonishment to empathy. Number 5. Merle Oberon, The Double Life with Double Pain. Merle Oberon, Hollywood's exotic beauty, hid both facial scars and her mixed Indian heritage. A 1937 car accident paralyzed half her face, shattered her cheekbone. Her husband, Lucien Ballard, invented the OB light to hide scar shadows, an invention still used today, but no one knows its origin from disability. She had to use whitening cosmetics to hide her brown skin, causing painful rashes. In Wuthering Heights, she nearly collapsed because strong lights could reveal both scars and real skin. Analyzing, this is a combination of physical disability and racial stigma. She denied relatives in Bombay, tears streaming. Personally, her confession to her last husband, "I don't know who I am anymore," breaks my heart. The face in the mirror wasn't hers, nor was her history. History shows Oberon was born in India to an Anglo-Indian mother, and she had to fabricate a Tasmanian origin to avoid discrimination. Corda Studio created a fake backstory, and after the accident, she had plastic surgery in New York to hide scars. From a social perspective, Oberon represents those who must live falsely to survive in white-dominated Hollywood. She was the first Asian nominated for an Oscar, but hid her heritage until death. Personally, I admire her resilience, but the tragedy is she lived in fear of exposure, leading to nervous breakdown. The emotion here is from mystery about her beauty to the pain of self-denial, and it leads us to Gene Tierney's invisible struggles, keeping the story continuous with emotional seamlessness from empathy to contemplation. Number 6. Gene Tierney, The Beauty Blinded. Gene Tierney, the perfect face but severely colorblind, unable to distinguish red from green. On set, she had to learn to identify fabrics by touch, living in fear of being asked about colors. In Leave Her to Heaven, she was nearly scolded for not seeing the red boat. Additionally, depression and bipolar were exploited by the studio with vitamins that were actually amphetamines and barbiturates, leading to collapse and electroshock therapy, damaging her memory. Analyzing, Tierney was a victim of a system that saw mental health as weakness. She wrote, "I lived in horror of being asked about the red dress when I didn't know if it was red or green." Personally, I admire her resilience in returning, using cue cards for lines. History shows Tierney contracted rubella while pregnant, leading to her daughter having disabilities, and this worsened her mental health. 20th Century Fox Studio forced her to work through breakdowns, and she was one of the stars institutionalized. From a personal perspective, Her story is a warning about mental health in Hollywood, where many stars were exploited to exhaustion. The story adds seriousness. Hollywood burns the candle at both ends, and the emotion is deep empathy for invisible struggles, leading to Harold Lloyd's risks, keeping the flow from contemplation to suspense. Number 7. Harold Lloyd, the one-handed grip behind the dares. Harold Lloyd, the man hanging from the clock on a high-rise in Safety Last, hid a 1919 bomb explosion accident that cost him his thumb and index finger, nerve damage. He used prosthetic gloves, but weak grip made stunts doubly dangerous. Analyzing, Lloyd proved ability by refusing safety, hanging with 3 fingers. He said, "I'd rather fall to my death than be sidelined for my hand." Personally, this is a symbol of determination. The gloves caused skin infections, but he never removed them. The studio forbade photos without gloves, threatening finances. History shows the bomb really exploded, causing temporary blindness and right-hand damage. But Lloyd continued stunts, using movie magic to hide. From a historical perspective, Lloyd paved the way for disabled actors, though hidden. The emotion is suspense mixed with admiration, leading to Bela Lugosi's Pain, with a smooth transition from suspense to seriousness. Number 8. Bela Lugosi, the real pain of Dracula. Bela Lugosi, the classic Count Dracula, limped not for art but from sciatic nerve pain from World War I. He used morphine to film, gripping props until knuckles white between scenes. Brain injury made him speak haltingly. Nearsightedness made his hypnotic gaze from trying to focus. The studio exploited to create scary image, but refused to adjust schedules. Analyzing, Lugosi's morphine addiction led to career collapse. He told fans, "The monsters I play endure pain. I understand them." Personally, Lugosi is the tragedy of an immigrant. Talent exploited. He was wounded on the Eastern Front, and sciatica made him dependent on opiates from the 1930s. The story adds mystery, Dracula's style from real disabilities, and the emotion is seriousness, leading to Katharine Hepburn with the flow from seriousness to admiration. Number 9. Katharine Hepburn, the trembling queen. Katharine Hepburn, the aristocratic icon, had essential tremor from age 30. The studio accused her of anxiety, but she adapted with fast speech, high neck, and constant movement. Director George Cukor supported with special angles. Analyzing, Hepburn turned tremor into style, but the studio used it to threaten, leading to box office poison period. She confided to Spencer Tracy, "I'm not eccentric, I'm strategic." Personally, Hepburn is inspiration, independence from the need to hide. She continued filming into old age, and tremor became part of her image. The emotion is seriousness about women's strength, leading to Lionel Barrymore with transition to social progress. Number 10. Lionel Barrymore, the wheelchair breakthrough. Lionel Barrymore, beloved supporting actor, had arthritis and hip fracture. Initially, the studio forced painful braces, blood seeping through clothes. Later, they accepted wheelchair but cut salary, exploiting financially. Analyzing, Barrymore was the first to openly have disability, but labeled with villain roles like Mr. Potter. Personally, this is progress mixed with prejudice. He opened doors for diversity. History shows his arthritis started in the 1930s, and he was from the famous Barrymore family, with siblings Ethel and John. He was once a painter and director, but disability forced him to supporting roles, yet he won an Oscar. From a personal perspective, Barrymore represents resilience, and his Mr. Potter role in It's a Wonderful Life linked disability to villainy, but he broke barriers. The emotion here is from admiration to hope for the future. In conclusion, these stories reveal the exploitative system of Hollywood's golden age. From my analysis, they teach about resilience and social change. Personally, I feel mixed emotions, sad for the pain, admiring the strength. Let's reflect when watching old films and realize those icons sacrificed for us today. If you like, Subscribe to the channel to explore more Hollywood secrets. Which story surprised you the most? Share in the comments below. Thank you for joining, and see you in the next video.